The Bible says God told his people to kill every Canaanite, men, women, children, infants. That's not a misquote. That's not a verse taken out of context by an atheist on the internet. That's Deuteronomy 20, Joshua 6, 1 Samuel 15. It's in there multiple times in plain language. In this video, I'll break down the three main positions that answer this hard question and see where you land. Part 1. The world of the Canaanites. Let's start with who the Canaanites actually were, because this matters more than most people realize. Canaan was the region roughly covering modern-day Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and parts of Jordan and Syria. Around 1400 to 1200 BC, it was home to a collection of tribes: the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, and a dozen names I can't pronounce. Biblically, Canaan was the land God promised to Abraham's descendants. But it wasn't empty. It had people in it. And God, according to the text, told the Israelites to go in and leave nothing alive. The biblical text gives us the reasons. The Canaanites centered their religion on gods like Baal and Asherah. They believed these gods controlled the rain and the harvests. To keep these gods happy, the Canaanites practiced rituals that the Bible describes as detestable. They also engaged in ritualized sexual violence and incest as part of their worship ceremonies. Their most famous ritual is child sacrifice. The Canaanites would burn infants alive as offerings to the god Molech. Archaeology has proven the Bible right. When Canaanite culture migrated and founded the city of Carthage in North Africa, they took these dark practices with them. Archaeologists have also uncovered sites called topets, containing the cremated remains of around 20,000 infants. Roman and Greek historians from that time also documented this horrifying reality. So, the severe language used against these nations was rooted in God's absolute rejection of child sacrifice. The Bible presents the Canaanite culture not just as different, but as a moral cancer. God tells the Israelites that the land itself is vomiting out its inhabitants because of these actions. The Israelites weren't told to kill the Canaanites because of their race. They were told to kill them because their culture had reached a point of no return. God claims he waited 400 years for them to change. He told Abraham centuries earlier that the iniquity of the Amorites was not yet full. He gave them 4 centuries of warnings before the first sword was drawn. Now, does that context make the command easier to accept? For me and for most people, no. But it's the starting point for every serious answer to this question. Part 2. 3 responses from Christian scholarship. Theologians, historians, and philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries. There is no single agreed answer inside Christianity. But there are at least 3 main positions worth understanding. Response number 1. The divine command. God's command is enough. This position says morality comes from God. He doesn't answer to a moral law above himself. He is its source. So when God commands something, that act is moral by definition, because he commanded it. Søren Kierkegaard called this the teleological suspension of the ethical. Big phrase, simple idea. God's direct command can override what our normal moral sense would say. The classic example is Abraham told to sacrifice Isaac. The act looks like murder, yet because God commanded it and then stopped it, the biblical framework treats it as something else. Applied to the Canaanites. God created and sustains all life, so he holds an authority over life and death that no general or government has. He gives life. He can take it. His reasons stand outside our review. The position carries real weight, and serious scholars hold it. It also carries a risk. Once you say, "It was right because God said so," you close the question entirely. That unsettles many people because it seems to mean that if God commanded something that looked like an atrocity, we would still have to call it good. Response number 2. The judgment for moral corruption. This was judgment, not ethnic cleansing. The second position says you have to look at what the text claims God is doing. In Genesis 15:16, God tells Abraham the Israelites can't enter Canaan yet because the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. That line matters. It suggests God watched a culture's moral trajectory and held off the invasion until that culture passed the point of no return. On this view, the destruction of the Canaanites is a divine judicial act, the same category as the flood or Sodom and Gomorrah. It targets specific practices that were destroying human beings, especially children. not a race. Theologian Christopher Wright argues the text is not primarily about ethnicity. The Gibeonites made peace with Israel and were absorbed without harm. Rahab, a Canaanite woman, sided with Israel, was spared, and ended up in the genealogy of Jesus. So the destruction aimed at a system, a religious and social order, rather than a people. That doesn't make the deaths easy to read, but it shifts the category from genocide, which runs on ethnic hatred, to what the text frames as judicial execution. Critics ask the obvious follow-up. If God can judge cultures, why hasn't he done it since? And why does it take swords in human hands? Those are fair questions, and this response doesn't fully answer them. Response 3. The progressive revelation. The Bible is recording an unfolding story. The third position is called progressive revelation. This view suggests that God's people didn't understand him perfectly all at once. The Bible is a long record of God slowly educating humanity. In the ancient world, every nation believed their gods wanted them to kill their enemies. It was the standard language of religion back then. This argument suggests that the writers of Joshua were describing what they thought God wanted based on the brutal culture they lived in. As time goes on, the Bible's picture of God changes. It moves from the warrior God of Joshua to the suffering servant described by the prophets. Finally, we get to Jesus. Jesus tells his followers to love their enemies and pray for those who persecute them. Scholars who hold this view say that Jesus is the final word on what God is like. If Jesus wouldn't order a genocide, then perhaps the earlier commands were a reflection of the people's limited understanding, not God's actual character. Part 3. The hardest objection. What about the children? Even if you accept that the adults were wicked, the infants were not. This is the part where most explanations feel empty. The text is specific. It doesn't say, kill the soldiers. It says, kill everything that breathes. Some theologians try to soften this. They suggest that the language of the Old Testament uses war talk. In ancient Near Eastern military reports, phrases like totally destroyed or left no survivor were often exaggerations. It was their version of a sports headline saying a team slaughtered their opponents. They didn't mean literal extinction, but even if that's true, the imagery remains. Why would God choose to use that kind of language? Others argue that in a world without social safety nets, an infant left without a family and a tribe faced a slow, agonizing death by starvation or slavery. They suggest that, in a brutal ancient context, a quick death was actually merciful compared to the alternative. You likely find that explanation unsatisfying. Most people do. It feels like an attempt to defend the indefensible. It forces us to ask if we can trust a God who operates on a logic so foreign to our own. Part 4. The bigger story. From judgment to grace. We often want the Bible to be a simple book with easy heroes. We want God to fit into our modern categories of good and kind. But the Old Testament refuses to be tamed. The story of the Canaanites isn't really about one nation. It's part of a much bigger story. Throughout the Bible, people keep rebelling against God. The Canaanites did. Israel did. And we do too. Yet God remained faithful to his promises. Instead of destroying humanity again as he did in the flood, God sent his Son. Jesus came to save sinners and offer mercy to those who trust in him. That's how the Bible's story ends, not with judgment, but with grace. Let me know in the comments below, how do you understand these passages, and let us discuss respectfully. Please like, subscribe, and check out my other videos for more Bible history and theology explained visually.